Let's move on from DHCP to DNS. DNS is just like DHCP is a great example of a client-server networked architecture where the client makes a request and the server responds with a service. So DNS, unlike DHCP, which has to send out a broadcast address, determine in order to determine where the DHCP server is, DNS already knows where its DNS server is. So the question I have for you is, how does DNS on your PC already know where the DNS server is? And it's something we've already talked about. And that's our pop quiz for the day. The answer, I'll let you mull this over for a second, but the answer is one of the 5 things that DHCP gives you: IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, address of the local DNS server, and the lease time. So that's how DNS knows. Great test question. Okay, in this example, my PC here, I want to browse to a site on pukanui.com. And since this is at University of Hawaii, maybe I can actually visit it. I don't know if it's in Maui or what island this university is on. But say everything goes to my local DNS server first, but my local DNS server may or may not know about all of the possible websites that it could go to, and probably not. It's got a directory of the most common ones, but it doesn't have all of them. If it doesn't have it in its phone book, as it were, it's going to escalate to an authoritative DNS server out on the internet to resolve, and all the authoritative root DNS servers on the internet, we'll talk about those later, know about every single domain name, can resolve it to an IP address, sends it back to the DNS server, and then back to my client PC. The next point here is important, that my PC does not get the information directly from the root server on the internet. It's a hierarchy. So it's always going to pass the information along from the root server back to the local DNS server and then back to me. So this is the only one that I talk to directly. I said the DNS is a hierarchy, and it is. So we're going to start right at the top of the hierarchy with the top level domain names. And it's important to get this language right, that .edu, .net, .org, these are all top level domain names. All these top level domain names branch up to the root system. And if you're wondering, well, what is the root? Well, the root are the 13 root servers that are on the internet. If you're wondering where and what those root servers are, that's public information. If you check out this website, you'll see the list, the IP addresses and names of the 13 root servers on the internet. These are helpful for troubleshooting purposes. So in the example before, I said your PC is not going to talk directly to the root server. Well, unless, for troubleshooting purposes, you configure your PC to do that. Say you suspect that you have a DNS problem and you want to rule out that Charter's DNS server doesn't have a problem. Sometimes it does, and you want to bypass it. Frequently a good idea, just to test things out. So you would go into your TCP/IP properties in Windows or Linux or your Mac and change your name server to a static address and make it one of these IP addresses that are in this wiki. And then if it works, you know it's a problem with Charter's DNS server. If it doesn't work, then the problem is probably something, in your operating system. So that's why it's helpful. You don't want to leave it set up this way for a variety of reasons. If you to do unto others thing, or if you did this for everybody, it'd be crazy. If everybody set up their DNS servers to their DNS entries on their PCs to point to root servers, well, that's a lot of traffic that is then flowing off the internet across your expensive wide area network. So you really want to keep DNS traffic local on your network whenever possible. Do you remember the other name server that's easy to remember? Now, it's not a root server, but it's an important name server, and it's easy to use for troubleshooting, and it's 8.8.8.8. That's Google's name server. So that's also helpful for troubleshooting purposes. Now we're still on top level domains. Within this top level, you'll notice 2 types. So one are the organization type that you're familiar with, like .edu for SIUE, .net, .org, .mil, and of course .com for a commercial site. In addition, for some web pages, you've probably seen that there's a country code at the end. Okay, where was I before I was interrupted by that phone call? We were talking about top-level domains and country codes. So for whatever reason, the only time you ever see a .us country code is like for public schools. It's about the only time I ever see a .us. Otherwise, the assumption is if it's a .com, it's in the US. Why? Because I guess all of these things were created in Silicon Valley in the US, and that's the kind of American arrogance that we have, that we make every other country append a two-digit code and we don't have to. I'm not saying it's fair, I'm just saying it's so. So for our German friends, they have a .de at the end of all of their websites. And if you're wondering why it's not GE for Germany, it's DE because in German it's Deutschland. And so DE for Germany is a good one to know. UK for the United Kingdom is an easy one. .ch is one of my favorites. And normally in class I have you do a guessing game to figure it out. But no, it's not China, Chile, or anything obvious. .ch is actually the country code for Switzerland. It's important because I lived there for a year. The easy way to remember, it's a Swiss joke that it stands for chocolate. Ha ha ha. I know it's not funny, but it's an easy way to remember. CH, chocolate for Switzerland. Not Sweden. Switzerland. Okay. When you get a chance, do check out this link. This wiki shows a list of all of the new top-level domains. So you may have thought that there are only a handful, and the list has exploded now. So not just like these were the original ones, and then they added things like .biz, but I'm talking about things like .blue, .red, .attorney. I mean, it's an odd list if you scroll through it. Again, this is a fantastic in-class activity to go through the list and just laugh at all of them. But do check it out. It's worth looking at. Okay, so many phone calls. Don't these people know I'm trying to make a video here? So moving from top-level domains to the next level, second-level domain names. So again, for the test, whether it's a certification exam or one of my exams, just this difference between top-level domains and second-level domains is important. So Microsoft.com, Apple.com, Hawaii.edu, SIUE.edu, these are second-level domains that typically correspond with company names, just out of convenience. So the big question is, who gets to say who gets what name? Because obviously Coca-Cola wants to have Coca-Cola.com, Pepsi wants to have Pepsi.com, Microsoft wants to have Microsoft.com. What stops you or I from taking those domain names? Well, you have to get registered. Well, who handles this registration? The answer to that is in the following video.
The U.S. plans to step down from a major internet stewardship role. The Commerce Department announced Friday it intends to cede control of the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, or ICANN. ICANN handles the assignment of top-level domains and the IP address space, like a table of contents or a phone book for some of the biggest chunks of the Internet.
Supporters say it's consistent with other efforts the U.S. and our allies are making to promote a free and open Internet. U.S. officials deny this move was linked to the NSA leaks.
But it's hard to ignore the timing. The Washington Post says critics are calling it politically tinged. And there's no getting around how revelations of NSA spying have soured U.S. Internet relations with other countries. Brazil, for example, has announced plans to convene a conference next month to discuss the next phase of Internet governance. It's a move largely thought to be triggered by invasive U.S. surveillance practices. Under the new model, no one entity will control the Internet, but releasing oversight of California-based ICANN raises the specter of possible censorship and information control. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich tweeted, "The turnover risks foreign dictatorships defining the Internet, but those in charge appear to know the risks. The Hill quotes an official within the Commerce Department. It must maintain the openness of the internet. We will not accept a proposal with a government-led or an intergovernmental solution. The turnover is slated for 2015 when ICANN's contract with the Commerce Department is set to expire. ICANN will bring together a panel of stakeholders to decide who will take the reins. For Newsy, I'm Christian Bryan, multiple sources, a broader view.
And what do I want you to retain from that video? Well, now you know who handles domain name registration globally. You know the relationship between governments and the ICANN, and you understand who does and does not run ICANN. So it's certainly changed over the years. And this news article was from 3 years ago, but still it makes the point that it's not run by the United Nations. It's not run by the United States government, at least not anymore. It used to be, no longer. Well, let's go down another level. We were at the top level, and then the secondary domain names. Now we're going into subdomains. So subdomains are this bit right before the domain name here. So Scheidler, I think, is a building at Hawaii's university, like our Founders Hall. So, for example, the subdomain, if you do an ipconfig or an ipconfig all at the command prompt, you should see our subdomain, which, if you're on campus, is simply going to be campus.siue.edu. But we do this because we have different subnets, and typically a subdomain will align with a subnet. So remember, a subnet is a logical division of the network based on business decisions. So for us, it makes sense to have, there's the campus network, there's the School of Dentistry, there, these different satellite locations for SIUE that are on different subnets. And just to make it rational, we assign different subdomain names to those subnets. I'm not saying it has to be that way. I'm just saying it makes sense to do it that way. At the very bottom of the hierarchy is the actual host name. So again, if you do an ipconfig, it'll tell you your host name. If you type in the command hostname, it will tell you your host name at the command prompt. And the host name is what's at the very beginning of the full domain name. Now this host name plus subdomain plus domain name plus top level domain is called a fully qualified DNS name. So the whole thing is your fully qualified DNS name. A lot of times we'll use the shorthand of, what's your name? Well, my name is Voyager, my name is NTL, but really the entire thing is the fully qualified DNS name because it is a hierarchy. I just realized my screen may have been truncating on that last slide. This is the fully qualified domain name. So the host name plus the subdomain plus the domain plus the top level domain, fully qualified DNS name. Okay, moving on. Once we understand the relationship in the domain name structure, it gets a little easier to identify spam and malware attacks and such. So here, aside from the fact that our domain name is not Southern Illinois University, it's siue.edu, but somebody that's not a smart CMIS major like you is just going to, see part of this and it looks legitimate. But really, all they've done is they've created their own subdomain, which you can create all the subdomains you want. You don't need permission from ICANN to create a subdomain because it's the domain that you get from ICANN. But this Yola site, obviously, that's not legitimate at all. They could have made this SIUE to make it look a little more legitimate. But there, it's easy to tell. That's an easy example. A more difficult example, sometimes email messages can look like they're coming from the correct domain name, siue.edu. That is, in fact, the correct domain name. It's still spam, and in fact what they're doing is spoofing this domain name. So they're pretending that the message is coming from siue.edu, when in fact it's not. A lot of times you can tell because they're horrible misspellings and awful grammar, kind of like what you turn in to me for homework assignments. Anyway, horrible grammar, and But in fact, it's so easy to change what domain name is being reported here because that's just editing the header of the mail message itself.